Ready for a trip back in time? We're going deep, deep into Athenian democracy today. A system we think we know,
Yeah.
but honestly it's way more complex and a lot stranger than our textbooks let on.
Absolutely. We're going way beyond the Athens birthplace of democracy thing. This society was way more interesting and intricate than we usually give it credit for.
We've got a crazy mix of sources for this deep dive. Historical accounts, a Restless History episode all about Athenian democracy, even a children's book by Tom Holland, The Wolf Girl, the Gods, and the Greeks. And what's wild is they all say one thing. To get Athenian democracy, you got to get the story the Athenians told themselves about who they were.
Yeah, the Athenian origin story, it wasn't just some myth. It was like the bedrock narrative that shaped their whole worldview. They thought they were autochthonous, like literally born from the earth, sprung from the soil of Attica. Just imagine feeling that connected to your land, seeing yourself as an extension of it.
It's like those ancient olive trees, rooted in those rocky hillsides for centuries.
Yeah.
You can almost feel that sense of permanence, that deep connection to the land.
Exactly. And that deep connection, it fed right into their idea of freedom. They believed they inherited their free country from their ancestors, and those ancestors sprung from that very same earth. This idea, as Pericles, a prominent Athenian statesman, once said, made them uniquely free and unified as a people.
So their democracy, it wasn't just a set of laws or anything. It was an expression of their identity, like woven right into their very being.
Exactly. Right at the heart of their origin story, you've got their mythical founder, Erechtheus. He embodies that connection to the land. He's described as, well, part human, part snake, born from the earth itself.
Part snake. Now that's an origin story you don't forget. But it wasn't just mythical figures shaping their identity. Their most famous hero, Theseus, Minotaur Slayer and all that, he played a big role too, right?
Theseus is interesting. He's not celebrated so much for fighting monsters, but more for unifying Attica, the area around Athens. He brought all these different communities together, and that laid the groundwork for what would become the Athenian citizenry.
So he's not just a legendary hero. He's more like a unifier, a proto-founding father, setting the stage for their democracy centuries later.
You could say that. His actions helped create this shared identity, a sense of belonging, and that was crucial for Athenian democracy to actually work. But we gotta remember, Athens wasn't always this powerhouse we think of. Early on, it was a struggling backwater, full of internal divisions and outside threats.
Okay, so back it up a bit. What were the big challenges early Athens faced?
Well, imagine a society split right down the middle. You've got wealthy aristocrats controlling the land and the power, and the common folk struggling to get by. They even lost pretty badly, actually, to a smaller city, Megara, in a battle for the island of Salamis.
Ouch, got a sting, losing to the little guy.
It was a wake-up call for sure. They realized they had to fix their internal issues if they wanted to survive, let alone thrive. That's where Solon comes in, the lawgiver. A fascinating guy, known for his travels, his wisdom, even heard the tale of Atlantis from those Egyptian priests, so the story goes.
Wait, Solon, the Atlantis guy, that's pretty obscure. But what did he actually do for Athenian society?
Solon, his job was to reform Athenian law, bring some balance to a society that was right on the edge. He wanted to make a system where everyone was equal under the law, protect the poor from being taken advantage of by the wealthy.
So like a mediator,
Yeah,
trying to bridge the gap between the haves and have-nots.
exactly. But his reforms, they were big, but they didn't magically fix the tension, the power struggles. Athenian politics was still a high-stakes game, exile, or worse if you lost.
So still plenty of drama and intrigue. What were some of the big power struggles in this period?
Oh, tons. You had the Alcmaeonids, powerful family, exiled after some shady business, making a fortune with King Croesus of Lydia. Then there's the Boutidae, claiming they had ancestral control of the Acropolis, that iconic hilltop, with the Parthenon.
The Acropolis. Hard to picture that as a source of conflict.
But think about it. The Acropolis wasn't just a bunch of pretty buildings. It was a religious and political center. Controlling it meant controlling a symbol of Athenian power and identity.
And then you get Pisistratus, the ambitious tyrant. Didn't he, stage multiple coups to take control?
Not one, not two, but three. He was a master at playing the political game, knew how to appeal to the people, built grand structures, even set up early forms of Athenian theater.
Sounds like he knew how to keep the people happy and on his side.
Total populist. Skilled at maneuvering between all the different factions and using public opinion to get what he wanted. His sons, though, Hippias and Hipparchus, not quite as good at the power game.
Uh-oh, trouble brewing.
Big time. Their rule, it got oppressive, led to instability. Eventually, Hipparchus gets assassinated. A love triangle gone wrong,
Oh,
actually.
talk about a plot twist.
Mhm.
A love triangle topples a tyrant.
Pivotal moment. And that's where Cleisthenes comes in. He saw opportunity, a chance to reshape Athens. He knew the old power structures based on those aristocratic families fighting for control. They were unstable.
So he's not just another power-hungry noble.
Cleisthenes had a vision. He thought if he could give the everyday people a real stake in governing, it would make Athens stronger and more resilient.
Ah, so this is where democracy really starts to take root. But I'm guessing that idea didn't go over so well with everyone.
You got it. His proposal for democracy, government by the people, it shocked everyone. The aristocratic rivals, they saw it as a threat. And even the Spartan king, Cleomenes, who had his own plans in the region, he got nervous. He wanted a weak Athens, one he could control, basically a Spartan puppet.
So a clash of ideologies, a fight for the soul of Athens. What did Cleisthenes do with all that opposition?
Cleisthenes made a bold move. He went straight to the people, promised them power, a voice in their government. It was risky, but it paid off big time.
That changes everything, going around the elites straight to the people.
It was a bold strategy, fueled by this deep belief in the power of the people. And the people, they were energized by this offer, never seen anything like it. They rallied behind Cleisthenes, drove Cleomenes and his puppet, Isagoras, right out of Athens.
Like something out of a history movie. A true fight for freedom.
It was a defining moment. The people, in their minds, they were taking back what was rightfully theirs, embracing this system of government rooted in their shared identity, their deep connection to their land. It's amazing, really. Cleisthenes, an aristocrat himself, he engineers this huge shift to democracy. And he does it in a way that's both like revolutionary and totally rooted in Athenian tradition.
It's like he was walking a tightrope, dismantling the old power structures, but appealing to that sense of identity of history.
Yeah.
How did he pull that off?
Cleisthenes was a smart guy, a brilliant strategist. He knew the key to Athenian instability. It was those clans, the big family groups, usually headed by some ambitious noble. Those clans were like power blocks, always vying for control.
Right.
Their rivalries always led to trouble. So he had to figure out a way to break their grip on Athenian society.
I bet that was a tough job. Dismantling centuries of tradition, those ingrained power dynamics.
What he did, he redrew the whole political map of Attica. Imagine taking like a mosaic and rearranging all the tiles to make a completely new image. That's what he did with Athenian society. Divided Attica into 130 districts called demes.
Demes. So like local neighborhoods, little communities.
Exactly. Think of them as the building blocks of Athenian citizenship. From then on, a citizen's main identity, it was tied to their deme, not their clan. So instead of being so-and-so, son of so-and-so, you'd be so-and-so of the deme of X.
So replacing your family name with your zip code, basically. Shifting from lineage to locality. Bold move, almost like creating a whole new social fabric.
Genius, really. By doing that, shifting to demes, he diluted the power of those old aristocratic families. Their influence was spread out over loads of demes, made it way harder for them to control things. Plus, to be a representative in the assembly, your deme had to choose you. So even the nobles, they had to get in good with their fellow demesmen if they wanted power. So built-in incentive for cooperation, a wider sense of responsibility, even for those who were used to having power just from family connections. But wouldn't they just become like mini-clans? Same problems, smaller scale.
That's where Cleisthenes' planning comes in. He thought about that. He added another layer, grouped the demes into bigger units called trides, thirds,
Yeah.
and then he combined those trides into 10 tribes.
Okay, so demes, inside trides, inside tribes, like a puzzle carefully put together to spread the power around, make sure nobody gets too much influence.
Exactly. And here's the key. Each tribe, it was made up of demes from different areas, one from the coast, one from the city, one from inland. That way, no single tribe could get too powerful or just represent one narrow interest. It was a system of checks and balances built into the structure of society itself. So Cleisthenes, he's like a political architect, designing this structure where power is distributed, ambition is kept in check. But how did he convince the Athenians to go along with this? Such a radical change to their society. These are people deeply attached to tradition, right? Not big on change.
That's the brilliance of it. Cleisthenes, he didn't present it as some radical break from the past. He said it was a restoration of old Athenian traditions. And to really seal the deal, he got the oracle at Delphi involved.
The oracle,
Since-
predicting wars and destinies and all that, that's bringing in the big guns.
He gave the oracle this list of 100 Athenian heroes, and she picked 10. One for each new tribe. Instant divine legitimacy, linking it all the way back to those mythical founders of Athens.
It's like saying, hey, this democracy thing, it's not just my idea. The gods are totally on board. Smart move.
Oh, absolutely. He knew how to tie his reforms into those deep beliefs and stories that made Athenian identity. He wasn't just changing laws, he was changing how Athenians understood themselves, their place in the world, their connection to their city.
Really makes you think about how powerful stories are. How the narratives we tell ourselves actually shape our institutions, even our sense of who we are.
Exactly. Athenian democracy, it wasn't just about voting. It was about creating this shared experience, that sense of belonging, of responsibility, all rooted in that unique origin story. And this system, it wasn't just some philosophical experiment either. It proved itself on the battlefield.
You're talking about the conflict with the Spartans. They weren't exactly fans of Athenian democracy, right?
The Spartans, with their strict hierarchy, their warrior culture, they were suspicious of it, saw it as a threat to their own power. They tried to crush this new democracy, but they underestimated what a united, motivated citizenry could do.
Sounds like democracy itself became this secret weapon. Turned Athens from a struggling city-state into a real force. It let them tap into the collective energy and talent of their people in a way those rigid societies just couldn't match.
You got it. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, he marveled at how this new freedom unlocked the Athenians' potential. He argued that free men, driven by a sense of ownership, participation, they fight harder than those stuck under a tyrant.
Inspiring idea that democracy itself can be a source of strength, of resilience. But I'm curious, what was everyday life like in this Athenian democracy? What did it actually mean to be a citizen in this radical system?
Imagine a city buzzing with political debate, happening in the marketplace, at the gym, even at dinner parties. Athenian democracy was participatory in a way we can barely imagine today.
Okay, paint me a picture. If I was an Athenian citizen back then, what would I be doing?
Well, first off, you'd be a man. Women, as we'll get to, they had a different but still important role. But you, as a male citizen, you'd have the right to go to the assembly, met regularly on the Phoenix, a hill overlooking the city.
So like a giant town hall meeting, any citizen could just speak their mind.
Sort of, yeah. Any citizen could get up there, speak, propose laws, debate the issues, direct democracy in action, a world away from our representative government.
It sounds exciting and a little terrifying. Thousands of people all trying to make decisions together. Wouldn't it just turn into chaos?
There were definitely challenges, and not every Athenian loved going to those long meetings. But they had systems, officials running things, keeping some order, rules for speaking, for voting.
A balancing act then, trying to harness that collective wisdom of the citizenry without letting everything just fall apart.
What about the everyday stuff of government? Did the assembly handle every single decision?
Day-to-day stuff, a lot of that was handled by a council of 500 citizens chosen by lot from the different tribes. This council, they set the agenda for the assembly, made sure laws were followed, took care of all the administrative things.
Chosen by lot, not elections or campaigns. Very different way to pick your leaders.
The Athenians, they thought relying on chance instead of elections or appointments that ensured all citizens, rich or poor, had a chance to serve. It was a way to keep power from ending up in the hands of just a few. That's so different from how we think about leadership today. Almost seems too idealistic, relying on chance to pick qualified people. What if someone totally unqualified got picked?
Well, they believed civic duty was everything. Participating in government wasn't some privilege, it was a responsibility shared by all citizens. They had faith in that collective wisdom and thought even people without special skills could contribute to running the city.
So, like jury duty, but for running the whole city, high stakes, trusting in the wisdom of the crowd.
It was serious business, and they took it seriously. They had systems to support those chosen for public service, training programs, experienced officials to guide them. And remember, you'd be serving with 499 other citizens. So there was a kind of collective wisdom at play.
It's amazing how they balance that individual participation with the need for expertise and stability. And then there's that whole ostracism thing, exiling citizens by popular vote. Sounds pretty intense.
Ostracism, that was unique to Athenian democracy, often misunderstood. It wasn't just about punishing people you didn't like or settling scores. It was like a safety valve, a way to stop anyone from getting too powerful and threatening the whole system. A preemptive strike against tyranny, basically.
So if someone was getting too ambitious, too powerful, the citizens could vote to exile them, to protect the democracy itself.
Exactly. If they thought someone was a threat to democracy, the assembly could vote to exile them for 10 years. Didn't lose their property, could come back after, but it was a strong message. Don't even think about being a king or dictator.
It's a fascinating idea. The people have the power to remove even their most popular leaders if they think those leaders are a threat to the system itself. That's real commitment to those democratic principles.
It shows you a fundamental difference between Athenian democracy and our modern idea of individual rights. For them, the collective good, the well-being of the whole, the demos, that came before individual ambition, even when it came to leadership. But Athenian democracy, it wasn't just men arguing in the assembly or serving on councils. There was another crucial part: women.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Mhm.
We know women couldn't vote or hold office, but you said earlier they had this different vital role. What was that all about?
This is where we got to challenge those old, simple views of ancient Greece. Athenian women, they couldn't participate in politics the same way men did, but they had immense spiritual power. They were the guardians of the sacred, the keepers of those rituals and traditions that connected the city to the gods.
So like a parallel system of influence running alongside the male-dominated political system.
Exactly. They were essential to keeping the city spiritually healthy, which, for the Athenians, was just as important as political stability. They were deeply involved in all those religious festivals, like the Panathenaea, celebrating Athena, the city's patron goddess.
The Panathenaea, I remember reading about that. The huge procession carrying a robe up to the Acropolis. Amazing spectacle.
That's the one. And that robe, the peplos, it was woven by Athenian women. They also took care of the sacred fire in the Erechtheum, a temple dedicated to Erechtheus, the mythical founder we talked about.
So they weren't just watching religious life happen, they were actively shaping it, weaving the fabric of Athenian identity and spirituality.
Absolutely. Their spiritual role was seen as key to the well-being of the whole demos. It reminds us that power and influence, they come in many forms. Sometimes those excluded from the traditional power structures find other ways to make their mark.
Makes you wonder if just focusing on women's exclusion from politics misses a big part of the story. Maybe we need to rethink our own ideas about power and influence when we're looking at ancient societies.
Good point. Athenian society, like all societies, it was complex, multifaceted. To really get it, we have to go beyond those simple categories and appreciate all the different ways power was expressed, how it worked.
This deep dive is really challenging my preconceptions about democracy. Athenian democracy, it was something else. With its system of demes and tribes, the assembly, ostracism, the vital role of women, it was a system of its time and place, shaped by a unique set of beliefs and circumstances.
And that's the beauty of studying history, right? It makes us question our assumptions, confront different ways of thinking, of being in the world.
We really dug into how Athenian democracy worked, that system of demes and tribes, the assembly, ostracism, and the whole crucial role of women spiritually. It's a system that's fascinating, but it kind of makes you think, how did the Athenians themselves see it? Did they think it was some model for everyone else to follow?
It's interesting. There's really nothing to suggest they were trying to spread the word about democracy, or that they thought their system would work everywhere. They're really focused on what worked for them, safeguarding their freedom and prosperity. It was made for their specific situation, their unique idea of what it meant to be Athenian.
But even for the Athenians, it wasn't perfect, right? It had its flaws, its contradictions. We talked about women being excluded from politics.
Yeah.
And then there's the slavery thing, a big part of Athenian society. How do you square those realities with all this talk about freedom and equality?
You're right. Those are big issues. We have to acknowledge those things when we're looking at Athenian democracy. They might have championed freedom and equality for citizens, but those concepts, they didn't apply to women, slaves, or foreigners. Their democracy was built on a foundation of inequality for a whole lot of people.
It's a stark contrast to our ideas today. Universal human rights. Makes you realize their concept of democracy was just different, bound by the time, by the social norms, things we wouldn't accept today.
For sure. And while we shouldn't judge the past only by today's standards, it's important to see those contradictions. Their democracy, as innovative as it was still a product of its time, reflecting the values and limits of that era.
So how did other people in the ancient world see Athenian democracy? Did it inspire copycats, or was it seen as this dangerous experiment?
It wasn't really copied that much. Actually, it was often viewed with suspicion, even dislike, especially by those who saw it as chaotic, unstable, mob rule. Think of Sparta, with their focus on order, military discipline. They saw it as a threat.
So not exactly that shining beacon of democracy we often think of. Its legacy is more complicated then.
Yeah, more accurate to see it as this a fascinating anomaly, a product of a specific time and place. Not some blueprint for all democracies. It was an experiment, bold for sure, but one that didn't really have a lasting impact on the ancient world.
It makes you wonder how our own view of it has changed over time. We tend to look at history through the lens of the present, don't we?
Absolutely. Our view of the past is always shaped by what's going on now, our own values. During the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, for example, they often use Athenian democracy as a warning. The dangers of giving the masses too much power. Thinkers back then were worried about mob rule, saw Athens as democracy gone wrong.
So they looked at Athens as what not to do, a system that just led to chaos and collapse. Interesting how interpretations of history can change so much, depending on the ideas of the time.
It just shows you that history isn't some fixed story. It's an ongoing conversation, a process of interpretation, shaped by our own viewpoints, the questions we ask. And Athenian democracy is a perfect example of how our understanding of the past can shift as our values and priorities change.
This deep dive has been, well, eye-opening is an understatement. We went way beyond that basic birthplace of democracy idea. Found a society that was more complex, more contradictory than we imagined. Athenian democracy, with its innovations and its limitations, it gives us so much to think about. The nature of power, identity, the human drive for self-governance.
And that's what we should take away from this. Athenian democracy wasn't just about voting. It was a reflection of an entire worldview, a way of life shaped by specific beliefs and circumstances. It reminds us that democracy, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a multifaceted concept that changes depending on the context.
So what does this mean for us today? How can understanding Athenian democracy, with all its complexities and, well, its problems, inform our own thinking about government, about society?
It makes us ask those fundamental questions. If it wasn't built on individual rights like we think of them, what were its core values? What held it together with all its issues?
It's worth thinking about. Maybe by looking at their ideas about collective identity, civic duty, the connection between people, land, and the divine, we can get a new perspective on our own challenges, our own possibilities.
It's a journey I hope you all take. And if you want to go even deeper, I highly recommend checking out that The Rest is History episode on Athenian democracy, and Tom Holland's book, The Wolf Girl, The Gods, and the Greeks. They give you a great look into this captivating, often confusing world of Athenian democracy.
They really do. They offer a glimpse into a society that wrestled with a lot of the same questions we're asking today. How do you balance individual freedom with what the community needs? How do you create a government that's both just and stable? Athenian democracy might not have all the answers, but it definitely gives us valuable lessons, thought-provoking perspectives. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep questioning everything.